I'd like to offer a trigger warning. There are in our readings today and in this sermon today some language and some ideas that might be challenging. How, I ask you, do people not see all the way from the Hebrew scriptures through the Christian scriptures, how do we not see God overthrowing the world's expectations at every turn and expecting us to follow suit? A blessed Laetare Sunday to you, by the way. Okay, I'll tell you how. That wasn't a rhetorical question, actually. It's because we have drunk deeply of the well of prosperity theology. And I'm not just talking about prosperity as money. I'm talking about a resigned acceptance of, well, that's just the way the world works. So we do not see, we cannot see the subversion of the scriptures. Because if we did, and if we took it seriously, it would mean uprooting every single thing that we thought we knew. It would mean seeing things for what they actually are. And then it would mean doing something about it. Shit. So we need to open our eyes. We need to see that subversion of the worldly, ungodly authority seems to be the name of the game in the readings today. The divine plot to overthrow Saul as king. Are you listening, politicians? In the epistle, which wasn't read today, it's telling us to expose deeds done in the dark. Are you listening, literally, every person who calls themselves a Christian? Jesus breaking the laws to help people. Are you listening, everybody? Even the psalm, the old, very pretty, popular at funerals, Psalm 23, which we usually don't think of as subversive, speaks of feasting defiantly in the presence of our enemies and of being anointed by God for kingship, for priesthood, even when we are powerless according to the world's standards. I can't tell you how many times I heard the story of David becoming king of Israel in Sunday school as I was growing up. The part of the story, though, that my teachers didn't make quite clear on the flannel graph was that Samuel, in going to Bethlehem, was committing treason. Are you listening? Treason. Samuel was literally defying the ruler. Saul was king, and Samuel was going to anoint another king in Saul's place. This is the brazen overthrow of government that we're being shown here, and Samuel was well aware of that fact, which is why he feared for his life and why he dissembled, he lied, saying, hey, I'm just going to do sacrificing things, definitely not going to do an anoint a new kingy kind of things. But it's okay, we say, because God. Okay, God. Whatever. Look, this story is suggesting that we look closely at our own idolatrous nationalism that we have been taught to think of as patriotic. Samuel is a reminder that even treason, the overthrow of the state, might be necessary if your country or your country's leadership has gone off the moral rails. Of course, that's the whole thesis of the Declaration of Independence. So treason and the selection of David. David! The little kid, the pretty boy, reminds us that once again, the people that we think are the game changers, the people we think are the chosen ones, the people we think are successful, these are the people who are almost always passed over by God. It's the younger son in this story, the son with messed up hair out in the pastures who smells like sheep poo. He's the one who was chosen. It's the woman whose health care is being determined by men. It's the child of a single parent working 2 jobs. It is the trans person with no place to pee. It is the nonverbal autistic child. It is the faggot who is told to tone down their queeniness. These are the people that God has anointed with oil, whom God has chosen to lead the moral universe. So be careful. These unexpected marginal people in frog costumes are the people who may well overthrow the social and political order. These are the people who, as the author of Ephesians writes, will drag dark deeds into the light. These are the people who will help us, the ones who are blind, to see. The problem, though, seems to be that we don't particularly want to see. Probably because, as the line goes in A Few Good Men, we can't handle the truth. It's not just that truth can be salacious and cruel. It's knowing that truth brings a degree of responsibility. Truth demands to be told and accounted for. And the Gospels and all of history have made clear, all too clear, what happens to truth tellers. Indeed, this is what today's Gospel reading from John is about. It's not about a blind man suddenly being able to see. It's about telling the truth. I always remember a preacher who said that miracle stories are never actually about the miracle. Right? They're always pointing to something much more important than a mere miracle. Right? And even aside from the miracle, there's so much going on in this story. Right? There's the disturbing issue of the Jews in the Gospel of John. Even though the man who was born blind was apparently one of them, even though Jesus was apparently one of the Jews, right? There's also the disturbing ableism, which assumes not only that disability or other ability is somehow the result of sin, which of course Jesus flat out denies, but also that other ability is something that needs to be fixed in order for the otherly abled person to be fully human, rather than making the theological and biological leap to believing that they already are full human beings who actually have much to teach us, not in spite of their disability, but because of it. And even aside from the ableist assumptions, there's really a kind of Lenten obsession with sin here, isn't there? Jesus' disciples asked him who sinned. The Pharisees immediately presumed that the MFKAB, man formerly known as blind, was a sinner. Lots of sin questions are being tossed around, whether or not God's work can be accomplished on the Sabbath, right? Or whether or not God's work can be accomplished by sinners. And of course, we see the assumption that doing work on Shabbat is work, therefore sinful, and therefore not God's work, unsinful. But what has struck me the most in the reading today is the absolute unwillingness to believe people when they tell the truth about their own experience, which, after all, ought to be considered our area of expertise, right? Look how many times the MFKAB has to explain what has happened. Look at how unwilling religious leaders are to believe what he says. Look at the fact that his parents actually have to say, he's of age, ask him, you idiots. Look at the debates about the reality of his own experience, to which he keeps saying, all I know is that I was blind. Now I can see. Look at the fact that rather than accept his word, they drive him out of town. His healing and everything about it has implied a power greater than theirs. And they can only perceive that as a threat. We have a long tradition, don't we, of blinding ourselves to the experiences of people who have no power in our society. This is why we ask sexual assault victims what they were wearing or how much they had to drink. Because we want so much to believe that they are not, in fact, victims. This is why we imply that trans members of our human family deserve to be murdered when we dead name them, or worse, ignore them in death. This is why we perceive black men as being larger and more threatening than they are. This is why we refuse to prioritize the poor, because we don't trust that it's not their fault that they're poor, that they didn't somehow sin. People do not believe me when I talk about the very real and justified, based on my personal experience, fears that I have as a gay man in a really straight world. We don't believe genderqueer and trans folks when they tell us about the experience of their non-binary gender. We don't believe black men when they tell us they're not armed. We don't believe women when they describe the myriad ways by which they are silenced daily in the grocery store and the boardroom. We don't believe poor nations who suggest that we're not doing them any actual favors by our ongoing economic colonialism that serves our own needs by providing us with cheap resources and slave labor. We do not, I dare say, believe the fears of unemployed white men who are not experiencing the benefits of cis white male privilege and who are feeling emasculated by that lack in a world that tells them that material success is a principal marker of masculinity. The Hebrew and Christian scriptures are reminding us on this rejoicing Sunday that it is the experiences of the outsiders, the youngest, the differently abled, the queers, the poor, the people we least expect to change the world. That is the experience we'd better be paying attention to. Because those are the people that over and over God is siding with. So perhaps the question we need to be asking ourselves this Lent, particularly as we journey toward Holy Week, toward the Passion, toward the cross, is not, have I sinned? But instead, who am I siding with? Amen.